We start this hour in the United States, and US President Donald Trump has signed a new executive order designed to stop courts or creditors from seizing revenue from Venezuelan oil that's being held in US Treasury accounts. The White House says the move protects these funds for use in Venezuela's economic and political stability after the recent capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The order treats the oil money as sovereign Venezuelan assets under US custody, making them off limits to private legal claims, even against companies that say they're owed billions after losing assets in Venezuela decades ago. This action comes as the US government works on a broader plan with Venezuela's interim leaders that could see millions of barrels of Venezuelan crude shipped to American refineries, and seeks to encourage major oil firms to invest heavily in rebuilding Venezuela's energy sector. The administration says protecting those revenues is important to US national security and foreign policy goals in the region, and that the order is backed by emergency powers under existing US law. Matthew Vidum joins us now. He's an American journalist and he joins us live from Washington, D.C. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us.
Sure.
The development here, things are obviously moving very quickly when it comes to the oil, to the development of American companies coming into Venezuela. What are your thoughts on this development? What more can you tell us about it?
Well, President Trump's new executive order about Venezuelan oil revenues appears aimed at ensuring that President Trump, and the U.S. government maintain control over the process of reconstruction, if you want to call it that, or transition to a democratic administration in Venezuela. He doesn't want, it appears that he's afraid that companies that have claims against Venezuela for nationalizing their assets in the past will rush to court now that President Maduro has been overthrown and is in custody in New York, awaiting trial on drug and narco trafficking and terrorism charges. It appears he wants to prevent Trump wants to prevent a rush to court by companies that have suffered losses at the hands of Venezuela, and he wants to put these funds into a kind of trust account, or so it appears to be, that where how the funds can be distributed in the future can be decided by the U.S. government, presumably by President Trump's administration itself. He wants the transition away from the socialist dictatorship in Venezuela to be as orderly as possible. Presumably, the companies that did suffer losses when their assets were nationalized will be able to file claims with the United States government for reimbursement, but that for their losses. But that's not entirely clear. President Trump claims to have authority under the Emergency Economic Powers Act, one of the same statutes that he invoked to levy reciprocal tariffs against countries all over the world, including India. He claims to have this power to to impound these funds and to assert that they are the funds belonging to the government of Venezuela, and that they are subject to sovereign immunity. Sovereign immunity means that you can't sue a government unless it gives you permission to sue it. This is a concept in international law, and so he just wants to maintain. The way I see it, he wants to maintain control over the process, and so he's doing this before they're to court to start trying to reclaim the assets that were taken away.
Matthew, do you think this will increase or decrease confidence in oil investors when it comes to the crude industry? Of course, you have the likes of Exxon Darren Woods, who said that Venezuela is uninvestable due to the political instability and the infrastructure there in the country. Will this executive order boost those hopes of or confidence of doing that?
I think, from what I can tell, this order will not be a permanent executive order. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that lends itself to, to being permanent. If it is only a temporary thing, I think it could help promote confidence in, by U.S. companies wanting to invest in oil facilities in Venezuela. If it is a permanent thing and U.S. companies are not allowed to litigate over the assets that they lost to Maduro's or Hugo Chavez's nationalization efforts, I think that could be a problem. But my guess is that this is just a temporary executive order. Remember, Maduro was only overthrown, was only captured and extracted from Venezuela, what was it, a week ago now?
Yeah.
And so things are not settled there. And, the Maduro's regime is still in power, even though he's not there. And it's a big question mark what's going to happen now if Machado is going to take over the opposition leader, and or if they're going to have new elections. So I think that President Trump is trying to put the brakes on any potential chaos until until what's going on the ground in Venezuela is a little bit clearer.
Indeed. Matthew, stay with us as we move on to a related update. And according to reports, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has signaled that the United States could lift additional sanctions on Venezuela as early as next week to help clear the way for Venezuelan oil sales. The move is intended to open up Venezuela's energy sector and support efforts to rebuild the country's economy after years of isolation under heavy international sanctions. Bessent also plans to meet next week with heads of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to discuss re-engaging those institutions with Venezuela, which has had limited formal cooperation in over 2 decades. Nearly $5 billion in Venezuelan IMF reserve assets that have been frozen could potentially be deployed to aid economic recovery if access is restored. Matthew, of course, the US administration is certainly moving forward when it comes to taking all the steps that it's needed to do when getting oil companies invested in Venezuela. However, what some people are criticizing it for is not politically changing Venezuela like many hoped it would do. Of course, the same regime remains in place despite hopes of opposition leader Corina Machado wanting to get in power. There were certain hopes of her being installed into Venezuela. If you compare the efforts to get oil companies into Venezuela and the attempts for political change in Venezuela, do you think that they're the same?
I think that, yeah, I don't really understand the question, but I think you mean that are the efforts to bring stability to Venezuela going to be helpful in promoting investment in Venezuela? And if that's what you mean, I think there's a possibility that they could be, that the Americans to promote stability in Venezuela could be helpful. It is not encouraging so far that the United States government has not taken any concrete steps to remove the Maduro regime from power or to put Machado or an opposition leader in charge of Venezuela. But as I said, Maduro was only removed a week ago, and they may not have figured out figured out everything that they want to do so far. So I think that these efforts to promote stability and to promote the Venezuelan economy are a good thing. You know, Venezuelan has what claimed oil reserves of 300 billion barrels, supposedly the largest on the planet Earth, and yet they only produce about 2 million uh, barrels of oil per day compared to the United States, which produces something like 14 million barrels of oil a day, and people don't even think of the U.S. as an oil producing power, and yet it is. I think that a lot needs to be done to fix the Venezuelan economy. A lot needs to be done to fix the Venezuelan system, legal system, to ensure that property rights are respected, or American companies who have had their assets taken, over the last 40 years or so, twice have experienced nationalization events in Venezuela, or they're not going to be willing to invest money in Venezuela out of fear that they're just going to lose it again. So you have to be more stability in Venezuela, and things seem to be going in the right direction. As we enter week 2 of Maduro being out of power, but it's a bit early to draw any conclusions from that, and a great deal more needs to be done to stabilize Venezuela to make it suitable for investment.
Yes, Matthew Vidum, do stay with us for our next story as we move on once again. And in Caracas, Nicolas Maduro Guerra, son of Nicolas Maduro, has released a video message saying his father is in good condition while being held by US authorities. The statement comes as tensions remain high following last week's American military operation in Venezuela. And at the same time, the United States has issued an urgent warning for its citizens to leave the country immediately. This follows reports that armed military groups are actively trying to locate Americans inside the country, raising serious security concerns. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says Venezuela has started releasing political prisoners on a large scale. He says the move follows US pressure and last week's military action, which he describes as a turning point. The comments come 1 week after the United States launched Operation Absolute Resolve, which led to the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia Flores. Both were flown to the United States, where they are expected to face federal drug trafficking charges. Matthew, what has to be met by both sides, both the Venezuelan government and the United States government, for this relationship to move forward on a mere diplomatic format?
I think that the Venezuelan government is going to have to back away from socialism, and that's not going to be very easy for them to do. You can't have American companies, as I alluded to earlier, you can't have them investing in a company, in a country where the government, the ruling junta is going to come in and steal their property away, their oil wells and their oil fields, and the oil products themselves. So there's going to have to be, the Venezuelan government is going to have to make a lot of concessions, and we'll see if they're willing to relinquish their grip on the economy. But it's a socialist economy. It's a socialist. The Socialist Party of Venezuela has control of the government. I don't see how they're going to be. I don't see how they'd be willing to do that. I expect they're going to have new national elections, and have to have a new government put in place before anything seriously happens. But as we're only in week 2 in the post-Maduro era, so what exactly is going to happen is not clear yet. But Venezuela is going to have to change if they expect foreign companies to come in and invest in Venezuela.
Matthew Vidum, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on to our next story.